This video is going to be about the organelles of the cell. Remember that a cell consists of a nucleus and the cytoplasm and the plasma membrane. We've already looked at the plasma membrane, but the nucleus, the control center, and the cytoplasm, which consists of the cytosol, the fluid in the cell, plus the organelles. And that's what we're going to focus on in this video. Cells are remarkably complex. Even though they're small, there's a lot of moving parts. Just think of it more like a small city in a very, very small space. We'll start with looking at some of these organelles, but just to identify some, A is pointing to the plasma membrane, and they'll just kind of work our way around. L is pointing to a flagella. There's only certain cells in the human body that have a flagella, namely sperm. K is pointing to smooth endoplasmic reticulum, whereas J is pointing to rough endoplasmic reticulum. I is pointing to cytoplasm. H is pointing to the Golgi apparatus. G is pointing to centrioles, which are going to be involved in cell division. F is pointing to a lysosome. E is pointing to mitochondria. D is pointing to a vacuole. C is pointing to cilia, so again, specialized cells like lining the trachea, let's say, have a cilia, and B is pointing to the nucleus. So let's start with the endoplasmic reticulum. Rough endoplasmic reticulum is called rough because it's embedded with ribosomes. Ribosomes are protein makers. So ribosomes, that's the R, RNA, help to assemble the amino acids into a protein. So think of rough and ribosomes. Smooth ER helps to detoxify, and it also helps to form the lipid bilayer. Both kinds of ER are going to be significant in transporting things around the cell, but they do play slightly different roles. The Golgi complex, or sometimes you'll hear it called the Golgi apparatus, it looks like a stack of pita bread, these folds of fatty membranes. And what happens is newly formed proteins built by ribosomes will travel through the membranes of the Golgi apparatus, and as they do, they're going to be modified and then packaged in these vesicles. Vesicles will prepare those proteins for transport either around the cell or to be exported by exocytosis out of the cell. So here we have an example of some endocytosis. So the plasma membrane is bringing in this complex molecule, and it's bringing it into this package. That package is called a vacuole or a vesicle sometimes. But those are just membrane-bound packages that store things like water or food or other important products. This vacuole is going to be connected to a lysosome. So that's the purple A, it's a lysosome. Lysosomes store digestive enzymes, and those digestive enzymes can break down other molecules or recycle old, worn-out organelles. Peroxisomes have a slightly different job than the lysosomes. Peroxisomes help to neutralize things like free radicals, and that's going to help the body in several ways, but mostly it's going to help the body by reducing something called oxidative stress. All right, so oxidative stress is when there's like too many free oxygens floating around that need to be connected to some other molecule. All right, so those oxygens can create like a chain reaction of unpaired electrons, and that can damage all kinds of organic molecules. So peroxisomes help to bind those up and reduce that oxidative stress. This is a mitochondria. You might remember mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. Well, how is it powering the cell? What it's doing is taking glucose molecules and then breaking them down by a process of cellular respiration. And as they break down, they release the energy currency of the cell, ATP. The more ATP that can be released, the more energy that the cell has to do things like active transport, because that costs energy. The cytoskeleton, so think of the skeleton as the framework of the body. Cyto means cell, or site means cell. So cytoskeleton is the skeletal framework of the cell, and that can come in the form of microtubules. Micro means small, tubule, tube, or microfilaments, small filaments. Either way, those are creating a framework for the cell. Some cells have small projections. In the case of cell A, those small projections are called microvilli, and what that does is it increases the surface area around the cell to absorb nutrients. In B, those projections are called cilia, and cilia can move, and what they're doing is moving things past the cell. So, for example, in your trachea, dirt and dust particles get moved out of your respiratory tract by the cilia. In the case of C, the flagella is a projection, a single projection in sperm that helps the sperm move from one location to another location. Nucleus is the control center of the cell. It's where all the DNA is stored. That DNA never leaves the nucleus, but messenger RNA will make a copy of that DNA, move through the nuclear pores, and take that information to a ribosome where it can use that information to assemble proteins. So ribosomes are typically closely associated with the ER, which surrounds the nucleus. So ER is often nearby the nucleus, especially rough ER, because that's where the instructions and the protein manufacturing is taking place. And that concludes this overview of cell organelles.